Oh, hello, Erin, Elliot.
Hi, Tyler Ellison.
Hey, love to see you, and thank you for having this chat with me and this channeling session with Riok. This is super exciting, and we've had a bunch of conversations in the past, like a handful, and it's cool to be able to continue this sort of play together.
I agree. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you to Riok.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, he's super psyched. Cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and get into the state, and I think the way we can do it with time is just if you want to run through the questions that people have provided, I would say go through those, and if at any point you want to ask your own questions, go ahead and throw that in there. And if we finish early, if we get done everything early, that's a-okay. But if it takes more time, my goal is to have it no more than an hour, because I know you have some stuff, I have some stuff, at that point. So does that sound good?
Yes.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Perfect. All right, so let me make sure all my technology devices are off, so that way there's no, yep, got nothing active that will make any strange alarms sounds. So I'm going to get into the flow and then have at it, my friend. Right, and we thank you so much for the co-creation of this interaction. It is our civilization's highest joy, passion, and ecstasy to be able to have these types of co-creative transmissions with you and your civilization. How may we be of service to you this day of your time?
Hi, Riok. Thank you very much for being here with us today.
Yes, it is our highest joy, and we thank you for co-creating the transmission with us as well.
I have some questions from some friends, and some of mine might be interspersed in this as well. The first one is about the teenage hybrid children.
All right.
My friend and I both had dreams about hybrid children who are in their mid to late teens, and they were exploring human intimate relationships and what that means. And we, they seem to be enjoying that. And they also, both of us kind of picked up that they were not just focusing on one significant other, that like they had a inclination to expand their intimacy to more than one other being. So I was wondering if you could fill us in on anything about that, or explain anything about what we were picking up on and what their process is.
Yes, well, in many ways, they are embodying certain, you could say, sexual patterns of behavior that are actually more naturalistic to your species than what you have been told. Understand, many of you have been told that monogamy is, in that sense, the naturalistic, evolutionary, sexual, romantic, intimate pattern for humans. But understand, that's one way those types of relationships can be explored. It's actually, in many ways, not necessarily the most naturalistic, because as many of you know, you create change within yourself throughout the passage of time. And as a result, the idea is whomever the partner is, after a certain point within your own evolutionary process, may no longer be the appropriate reflection for you as you continue to create change within yourself. And at some of those moments, that's when there is an opportunity for, in that sense, another partner. And understand that hybrids, in that way, in the sense that they are created utilizing your genetics as well as genetics from a multitude of other species, are also demonstrating the idea of that type of behavioral pattern, because in many ways it represents the idea of a more naturalistic sense of relationships, ones that change and reflect your inner changes back to you.
That makes sense. But what about, it seems like what you're describing is one partner after another, maybe at a faster rate than what we do as humans. We don't let go of a partner as quickly as maybe the hybrids would. But what about like more than one at one time? Is that?
Yes, this is also acceptable. Understand, just because you recognize that another reflection is appropriate for you doesn't necessarily mean you have to leave behind the idea of the partner you're currently with if there's still something there that is of service to you.
Okay. Is that when they come to Earth, will we be at that point where our relationships will be more like that?
You're beginning to move into that direction collectively, yes. There is a high probability that there will be very large changes in the idea of sexual, romantic, intimate patterns of behavior amongst your species. This has to do with the idea of certain belief systems that are based in fear being shed collectively by your species in relationship to losing something or losing someone.
Okay.
Or that's actually why many of you stick around in relationships that are actually not reflective of your joy, because you believe in some way, we're speaking again generally, that that person is in of themselves your joy reflected back to you, and that that can be the only reflection of your joy back to you. But there are, in that sense, many individuals that can reflect your joy back to you in different creative ways. And when you recognize there are many individuals that can reflect your joy back to you, and that your joy is, in that sense, eternal, alive within you because it's your natural state, then there's nothing to lose. When you shift from one partner to another, nothing is lost. Even if that means, in that sense, no longer being intimate with that person, or if it simply means expanding the circle of intimacy, nothing is lost.
That's beautiful.
Yes, yes, as are all of you.
Mm-hmm. How would that be reflected in our homes? You know, there's most typically a couple living in a home with a family or something. And if we're going to be switching so much, I mean, what will that look like? Could you
understand it represents the idea of a transition from more of an isolationist type of community to a more communal type of community, where in that sense, it's more than two people raising a child. Like, you are familiar with the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child?
Oh, yes. Yes.
There's a reason that phrase has survived the test of time on your world. It actually represents some of your more naturalistic means of cohabitating with one another.
That's interesting.
Yes. For understand, the reason that it appears as if you all live in little boxes side by side next to each other is because the box structure in many ways represents certain walls that you have put up within your own psychology as a species. But as you break those walls down, so to say, through letting go of the underlying belief systems that generate them, you will then observe that type of change within yourself being reflected at the society at large.
So it'll eventually be a huge mothership we're living in?
Yes. Well, you already are living on a huge mothership. For your planet, in that sense, is in and of itself a spaceship. However, understand you will be living that knowledge in an embodied way. It will be, in that sense, expressed through you. Again, this is for those of you that choose the idea of these types of frequency versions of Earth if they resonate with you. Not all of you have to choose this. This is simply a description of one timeline potential that is available to all of you that in many ways is synchronized with many extraterrestrial frequencies. All right. There are many ways that your evolution can play out. We are simply giving you readings of the energy at this current moment.
Okay. Do you have any suggestions for my friends and me who seem to be connected similarly to the hybrid children, having similar dreams? And we have a group where we talk about the hybrid children. Do you have any specific suggestions for us how we can amplify this?
Yes, by in that sense, taking synchronized naps or periods of sleep together. And whilst you take your naps or periods of sleep time together, have a common object shared between the group that you place under your pillows.
Okay.
If it can be, in that sense, something akin to a crystal, one piece of crystal that is, in that sense, divided into multiple smaller pieces that will create a stronger linkage, a stronger bond. But it can be different objects. It doesn't have to necessarily be different shards of the same crystal. There are many ways that this can be done, but the idea is having common objects that in many ways represent your group collective consciousness placed beneath your pillow and napping and sleeping at the same times.
All right. That sounds fun.
Yes.
All right. Here's a question from someone. He was wondering why label things linearly, such as the sixth hybrid race, when everything is now? Why do we need assistance from the Sassani if we already are complete in a sense?
Well, understand, we simply reflect back to you your own completeness. We're a side effect of you embracing the idea that you are complete beings. Because that's how we operate, like attracts like. So when you embody that state of I am, you then shift to reality experiences of Earth where you're encountering other beings that are reflecting back to you the embodied I am. We are some of those beings. And in relationship to the terminology, this is simply done so you have context of what's going on because you experience your lives linearly. Even though you're becoming more malleable with this type of experience, it is for contextual convenience that we label these things in these ways so you can understand more of the story of that which is taking place in relationship to the story that is taking place in the consensus realities that we are engaging with. For if there were no terms, and if there were no story type contexts, then your physical reality experience for many of you would be quite confusing. It's for convenience, so you can make sense of it. Because that's how your consciousness is organized. Your consciousness is organized by story, by archetypal patterns. So we present information in ways that registers with the idea of your overall psychological organization. So you can make sense of the reality.
Okay, thank you.
If there were no story, there would be no meaning. Meaning creates story. That is why beliefs create reality. You are writing stories. You are writing your reality.
All right, thanks.
Yay. You are welcome.
Do you have any privacy on Sassani? Some humans aren't comfortable with the idea of all beings of a civilization having access to their thoughts and behaviors at any time.
Well, understand that there are types of energy dynamics that one can create within themselves that represent, you could say, privacy. Understand that, think of it like this. Within our collective consciousness, there are a variety of different frequencies that are taking place. Think of the different frequencies as different roads. You have major highways. This represents the general collective telepathic link that is shared amongst all of us. And you can, in that sense, broadcast your own, so to say, energetic frequencies through that major highway of telepathy. But there are also back roads. There are also side roads. And you may encounter some other beings there, but understand those roads are less populated. But all of that is taking place, so to say, within the overall collective consciousness of our species. So it simply depends on the frequency of the information that determines if it's going to be something that the entire collective, in that sense, is simultaneously aware of. It's all about how you choose to broadcast the information. Ironically, when you say this information is secret and I can't let anyone know about it, you're actually drawing a great deal of attention to you, because in that sense, secrets are meant, so to say, in terms of polarity, to be discovered. So privacy and secrecy are two different things. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right.
You don't have secrecy on your planet.
No. We have no need for secrecy, because secrecy, generally speaking, is a type of energetic dynamic that comes from fear-based belief systems. We must keep this secret or something negative will happen. The masses will find out and there will be chaos. Sound familiar?
Yes.
Yes, yes. But privacy, that's a little different. I prefer for this information to remain in my local awareness for the time being, and then if I'm excited to share it in a greater way, I'll share it in a greater way. You can tell the difference?
Yes.
All right.
So you do have that
Yes, we have individuals that in many ways choose to create levels of privacy. Now, that doesn't mean the information will exist in a vacuum. It can still be observed, but the idea is it will attract certain types of observation that will be complementary to that individual's preference. It won't be, as you call it, an invasion of privacy.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, perfect sense. Some humans are also wondering about losing, as we evolve, the sensory pleasures that we are familiar with, like tasting food. Do you still have access to this in your evolved state? And can you describe what it is like to sense things as a Sassani being?
Well, understand, it's similar to what you understand as the physical sense of taste, but it's a more expanded sense of taste that doesn't actually require us to eat food. We still are able to experience what you consider to be taste, but it's more in that sense multidimensional in nature, and in that sense is a side effect of our overall energetic scannings of certain realities and certain beings and certain natural substances. In many ways, as you go up in the evolutionary ladder, so to say, what seems to be separate senses begins to merge together and form one total sense. You could still differentiate the types of frequencies. Oh, this is more of an auditory type of frequency. Oh, this is more of a visual type of frequency, but it all generally blends together into a holistic overall sense. The specialized differentiation that you have with your senses on Earth is specifically because you're in a physical reality. But as you become less and less and less physicalized, you no longer require that type of differentiation within your overall sensorial detection mechanisms. You're familiar with the phrase on your world, the pleasures of the flesh?
Yes.
Tiny in comparison to the pleasures of the spirit?
Mm-hmm.
You're familiar with this, generally speaking?
Yes.
There's a reason this phrase exists. Because it's not as if you're losing the idea of physical pleasures, you're experiencing them from the idea of a more multidimensional point of view.
Okay.
Does that make sense for you? That's the question.
Yes, it makes sense. Could you give us a suggestion about how to blend more of our senses together?
Yes, by operating not in fragmentation, but in unity within your own being.
Like when we eat something, how will we do that, for example?
All right, so in that sense, you are eating your salad or your soup or whatever you may find yourself eating. And go fully into the idea of the taste. Go fully into the idea of the experience of the consumption. What does it feel like to thoroughly chew? What does it feel like to swallow? What does it feel like to, in that sense, have the different sections of the taste bud regions of the tongue lighting up? What does it feel like to have a certain thermal quality within the oral cavity as you are consuming the idea of the food? And as you immerse your senses into the eating, you will find you're using more than just taste. You're using feeling. And feeling invokes all of the senses. So place the totality of your awareness into whatever type of sensorial activity you are engaging in. You can do the same thing with music. Fully listen to the music. You can do the same thing with smelling a flower. Smelling a flower. Fully smell the flower. Immerse all of your awareness into that sense, and you'll experience a more multidimensional form of that sense. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right.
You said that the sense of feeling, the sense of touch, is that, what did you say about that? Is that one somehow more broader?
Well, understand that when you bring your awareness, so to say, into whatever sensory function you are utilizing, you are actually bringing into that equation an element of feeling. Not just sensing it, but feeling. It invokes the emotional body.
Okay.
And it invokes higher levels of your own spiritual awareness, because that's how your awareness functions on higher levels. So many of you, for example, will listen to a song and you'll go into certain thought patterns within your own consciousness. Or you, in that sense, will be eating your food and you're talking on your phone at the same time. You're fragmenting. the idea of awareness. Not to say that that's bad, not to say that's a negative thing or is dysfunctional in any way, but in that sense, it's almost as if you are segregating some of your awareness from one aspect of perception to another. So when you become more unified in your senses, then you experience more of a multidimensional awareness of that respective sense.
Let's see. But can't that be seen as being multidimensional when we fragment ourselves? Like if we're watching something while we eat, is that a different?
It can be. However, you will find that in many ways in terms of developing extrasensory awareness of a particular sense, it may not be productive in that way.
Okay.
It may benefit you in other ways. We're not saying it's a wrong thing to do or it is somehow going to slow down your evolutionary progress. We are simply talking about it in respects to the idea of developing multidimensional awareness of a specific sense.
Okay.
Many of you, when you are in that sense, are problem solving, so to say, or creatively thinking. You'll put on some music and creatively think, and that's not a bad thing. It actually supports you in that particular path. Yes?
Yes.
But in terms of developing a higher multidimensional awareness of a particular sense, putting all of your awareness into that sense will expand your point of view of that sense, thus increasing multidimensional perception of that specific sense.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yes.
All right.
Are there any comedians on Sassani?
We think you know one, at least. Yes?
Yes.
Yes, yes. There are, in that sense, quite a few beings that engage in comedic patterns of thought and speech. But understand, from our perspective, generally speaking, we observe creation itself as a master comedian because the whole shebang, so to say, to us is quite hysterical. The idea of existing at all is, in that sense, very silly to us. It is very fun to us. It is very playful for all of us. And in that embracing of the paradoxical qualities of existing, we, in that sense, naturally perceive the humor that exists within the nature of existence.
Okay. Someone was wondering if you could provide a Sassani joke.
All right. Are you ready?
Yes.
What did the astonished co-creator say to herself as she looked into the mirror of reality for the first time?
What?
What is the meaning of this?
Okay.
Because in that sense, it's up to you to put in the meaning to drive the effect from that which you are creating.
All right, makes sense.
Yes.
We have 3 requests for symbols from you. Are you willing to give us some today, or different types of?
This is possible. Depends on the nature of the request. However, we will take it piece by piece, as you say.
Okay. The first one is they're asking for an aspect of Sassani energy or a group of Sassani beings whose vibrational sacred circuit symbol activates the heart or the sense of gratitude. He's asking for a symbol that would do that. Connected to Sassanis.
Connecting the two Sassanis.
No, connected to just the Sassani.
Connected to Sassani. All right. Well, understand the generalized symbols that you have already been given by the Bashar represent this type of frequency. For understand, our entire civilization operates from the heart and from an attitude of gratitude. So simply using the contact symbols that have already been provided can greatly assist you as a permission slip in accessing that state of being.
Okay. So you don't have a specific one for the heart?
If you wish, you could, in that sense, take the triangle symbol that has been given, the black equilateral triangle, and you, in that sense, could create in this image another copy of it, and you can, in that sense, invert it. So in that way, you are somewhat forming the idea of a Merkaba-like structure utilizing the Sassani symbol for contact.
All right, thank you.
This specifically target the heart because in that sense it mirrors how your yogic traditions pictorially depict the heart chakra as a symbol.
All right. There's another one about could we have a sacred circuit symbol or other telephone number for the inner Earth civilizations.
All right. This one, in that sense, will be rather simple, but we understand that is oftentimes of the utmost benefit for your species to keep things simple. So we have, in that sense, a circle within a circle. Within that center circle, creating the idea of 4 lines that extend up, down, left, right. The lines do not, in that sense, converge at the center of the inner circle. Rather, they begin at the outer border, so to say, of the inner circle. So it's almost like what you consider to be a target sign, so to say. Not quite target. We are, in that sense, searching the channel's brain for an appropriate word to use here. The best analogy we can use here is a scope. If you were looking through a scope through one of your guns in physical reality, the idea of that symbol, crosshairs, thank you, that is the word. Crosshairs, so to say, within the idea of a secondary circle, representing the idea of the 4 seasons of your Earth, dividing the circle, so to say, into 4 quadrants, and then that inner circle representing the inner Earth awareness. If you wish, you can color the idea of these 4 sections with the colors of the elements, and this will also assist you in that respect. You can, in that way, color the center circle violet or gold, whatever represents high frequencies to you, and it will represent you tuning into that color frequency of consciousness within your Earth.
All right, thanks.
Yay.
The next one isn't asking for a specific symbol for from you, but they're just asking if there's a specific set or era of symbology that we can reference to decipher the crop circles.
By understanding the idea of Pythagorean numbers and number meanings, you can begin to understand some of the archetypal meanings that exist within the idea of the crop circles, because many of the crop circles emerge as geometric configurations, and understanding the archetypal representations of number values and of shapes can help you understand some of the messages that are being communicated through the idea of the crop circles. Now understand, crop circle images contain a variety of different meanings. Some of them relate to your psychology, some of them are actual messages for the local area where they are created. Some crop circles, in that sense, are communicating certain types of technological application as well. But understanding the idea of number values, of the archetypal nature of certain shapes, as well as the specific locations where the crop circles are showing up, can help you to develop a holistic meaning for understanding the types of messages that can be intuited through analyzing the nature of the crop circle.
Do you ever take part in making those crop circles yourself?
From time to time, yes.
Could you tell us about one time that you did?
Yes, we, in that sense, in your state of Idaho, created multiple crop circles with the hybrid children, specifically to assist them in the idea of understanding how consciousness in that way can shapeshift reality. And we utilize the idea of a group awareness to, in that sense, manipulate the idea of certain growth patterns within the field that allowed for certain types of differentiation of electromagnetic energies to then be elicited within the area where we were generating the crop circle. And in that sense, we were able in that way to allocate resources in an accelerated way from certain growth patterns of plants to other plants within the field. And in that way, we were able, in that sense, to, you could say, edit the template level, so to say, of the reality, allowing for us to create within that field certain pictorial representations that you would understand as crop circles. Now understand, your Earth does this oftentimes, naturally, For understand, some crop circles actually represent the energetic translation of your ecosystems. And if in that sense there weren't certain crops growing there and it were in that way a more wild environment, those types of patterns you see depicted in the crop circles would actually represent the idea of different types of plant life, different types of animal life, different types of elemental consciousness essentially being, you could say, invoked in that particular area. But oftentimes crop circles will also have extraterrestrial components as well, and sometimes it's actually a co-creative dance between extraterrestrials and the Earth consciousness. But this is, in many ways, a scenario, a situation where for the education of the hybrids, we generated crop circles as a form of educational exercise.
Did any humans see these?
Not in the areas we performed the tasks. And this was done for specific reasons.
Okay. Would there be any chance you all could do one where some of us could see?
This is possible, yes.
Could you give us a location and a date?
One moment. New Jersey. 4 months. And the information will find you if it is relevant. But understand that look to this area. There is a great deal of agriculture here.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Do you define yourself differently depending on who you are interacting with?
Do we define ourselves differently depending on who we are interacting with? Well, generally speaking, we operate from a level of awareness that embodies the idea of knowingness rather than belief. Now, understand, we have definitions for things, but we don't necessarily operate from the definition level as many of you do. We operate from the level of knowingness. Now, in that sense, we will, you could say, organize our knowingness in particular ways to tune into different frequencies of ourselves that will be in that way relevant to whomever we are interacting with. So we will shift our frequency to, in that sense, balance and match the energies of whomever it is we are speaking with.
Oh, okay.
Does that answer the question sufficiently?
Yeah, and compared to humans, we would more define ourselves differently depending on who we're interacting with.
Yes, and oftentimes this is not in many ways in the highest of service to you in the ways that many of you do it. When I'm with this person, I must be this kind of person. When I'm with this person, I must be this kind of person. When really the idea is simply be yourself, and you will naturally be whatever version of yourself you need to be in that interaction without needing to micromanage so much.
And that's what you do, right?
Yes, yes. There are certain archetypal patterns of organization we will utilize, and there are, you could say, certain definitions we have attributed in some ways to those archetypal patterns in terms of what they represent to us individually, but still that's something that in many ways is automatic. We tune into that energy as needed. It's not in many ways micromanaged. When you are fully operating from that which you actually are, you understand through the path of passion whatever type of words you must use, whatever type of thoughts are appropriate, whatever types of actions are appropriate, so to say, that will be supportive in relationship to that interaction. It's a complete kit when you operate from passion. So the micromanaging, the necessitating of different definitions for different people becomes less and less and less relevant. For when you understand, generally speaking, that all individuals are ultimately reflections of yourself, then understand you can just be yourself and you'll be whatever version of yourself is most aligned with the highest, you could say, flow or frequency of that respective interaction.
Okay. And with you, does that look different from being to being? Look vastly different?
Yes, because each being we interact with is vastly different. So we will break it down like this. We are always operating from the frequency of our true nature. How that manifests will vary from person to person to person to person to person, because the way in which we express our excitement in each of those interactions will be different from person to person to person to person to person. We're always consistently across the board seeing the other person as a reflection of ourselves, and we are always operating from the idea of our passion, but that will always manifest differently from one interaction to the next because each interaction is unique and different.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense for you?
Yes, but is there a common thread, like a Sassani or an individual thread for who you are in each interaction?
Well, we understand the idea of our own individuated consciousness, but we also understand that we are fundamentally the same. And in that awareness of our sameness, we are able, in that sense, to observe its polar opposite, our uniqueness, in a way that is equal and balanced. For understand, the uniqueness that you are naturally flows through you when you are following your passion. And that uniqueness then complements the idea of the underlying sameness, the underlying unity that exists of all things being one thing. It balances each other out perfectly. Does that make sense for you?
Kind of, yeah.
All right. Is there any way we could clear it up a little bit more?
I guess it's just about like your sense of identity
Is very fluid.
But
understand at a core level, we know that we are unique. We know that we are unconditional love. We know that we are passion. And we, in that sense, don't have, so to say, a fixed identity. We have a malleable identity that will shift and ebb and flow as we follow our passion in unique ways. And you could say we form an overall understanding of that which we are when we connect the dots of our passion from one interaction, one co-creation to another. For there, in that sense, are underlying themes that unify all of the seemingly separate actions of passion that create an overall sense of the type of character of individual that we are. But understand that that's not experienced in a way that's fully linear, for we can scan the entirety of our timeline. So we can develop a sense of our overall character at a very young age by observing that which we are engaging in when we are 30 or when we are 300.
Wow.
Does that make sense? Did that clear it up a little bit more for you?
Yeah, it did.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Yay.
Do you have an equivalent of expelling waste as humans do from their bodies?
We have certain types of energetic, you could say, exchange processes that are somewhat akin to that which you have, but generally speaking, not really the same way that you have on Earth. The types of recycling and waste generation, generally speaking, comes from the idea of not only the nature of your Earth and the incarnational experiences here, but also the idea of the physical reality in general. But as you become more quasi-physical and you depend less on food, as well as the idea of certain things like air and oxygen, the idea is that you generate, so to say, less of a waste product. But understand, nothing's really a waste product. You only call things waste products because you're not utilizing them in ways that are actually of most benefit.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Why aren't we doing that?
Well, why aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, because we don't know what to use it for.
Well, we can give you some hints if you wish.
Yeah, I would love to.
Understand that just by recognizing that your CO2 emissions, what you breathe out on your exhale, nourishes trees, begins to tune you back into the awareness that you are already, so to say, utilizing some of your quote-unquote waste or excretion products in a positive, beneficial way. Now, understand you are, in that sense, constantly releasing fluids, yes, when you go to the restroom, yes?
Well, not constantly, but yeah, on occasion.
Yes. Well, many of you, in that sense, throughout your day are going through this. Yes. Constant may not have been the most appropriate word. However, understand that that can actually be utilized for plants. That can be utilized for crops. And many of your indigenous cultures were aware of this and utilize their own excrement, in that sense, for the idea of agriculture in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Now, understand, many of you don't do that because of certain belief systems that you have about your body and some of those fluids, but these are certain examples of how your own materials, so to say, can be utilized for regeneration. there are many ways the, so to say, waste aspects of the human body can be utilized for the idea of balance and regeneration. So in that sense, it ceases to be seen as a waste product, and in that sense is then seen as a resource.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes.
Okay. Can you give your perspective on stealing, piracy, taking things from others, apparently without permission, even though we know at a higher level everything is done by agreement and permission? But how do we handle it from the physical mind's point of view?
Well, understand it comes down to your own belief systems about that which you are doing. So understand, if you believe that what you are doing is somehow bad or wrong, then that's the type of effect you will get in relationship to any action you are labeling as bad or wrong. If you label the idea of piracy as a bad thing or a wrong thing, then the idea is those who are writing, in that sense, privacy or copyright laws are in that sense inviting individuals who will actually attempt to, in that sense, break those laws. So it all comes down to your beliefs about what these laws are and what they represent. For understand, if the individual who desires to pirate defines, you could say, copyright laws as something that is, in that sense, an expression of a certain being's preference, then they will know, if they are truly being themselves, that to honor that copyright would actually be not only honoring the preference of the other, but would also be honoring the preference of the self. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And so that also holds true with the looting that's going on and stealing from the riots.
Yes, well, understand that there are a variety of different reasons why this is occurring. And there are a multitude of different belief systems at play, but generally speaking, the same type of information we previously expressed can also be, in that sense, applied here as well. Yes. Okay. For when you are, in that sense, taking from someone else, it's coming from a place of inner powerlessness of, I can't manifest that same thing on my own because I am somehow invalid, or I am somehow weak, or I am somehow powerless. Therefore, I must take it because that's the only way I can do it. But if you recognize you are, in that sense, source, you are the infinite everything expressing itself through the incarnational experience of a human being, then you will recognize you can generate whatever form of abundance is relevant for you in your reality.
Okay, well, what about the quest to save the world through sharing copyrighted information that people think will really save and transform?
Shadow side of the hero archetype.
The shadow side of the hero archetype.
Yes, yes. For understand that the hero archetype in that way represents quite a few things. The idea of the main character in the story, the idea of the trailblazer, the idea of the hero who slays the dragon and saves the day. All of this, of course, can be metaphorical for being the hero in your own life. For in that sense, facing the dragon within you, the idea of the, you could say, uncomfortable emotions or the shadow side, and letting go of the beliefs, i.e. slaying the dragon, that create those uncomfortable feelings. So you, in that sense, can be the immortalized eternal hero. In other words, channeling your eternal spirit through you. That in many ways represents the light side, so to say, of the hero archetype. With us so far?
Yes.
The shadow side of that is, oh, this foe I am facing is so big. They have more power than me. They're bigger than me. And if I don't break these rules, if I don't, in that sense, crack some eggs to make an omelet, I will lose the battle. So I must cheat, or I must come about things in ways that are, so to say, in your terms, sideways. The shadow side of the hero archetype. It's shadow in that way in the terminology we are using because that is the same type of consciousness of the overall hero archetype, but coming from the idea of negative limiting belief systems as the motivation. Rather than the light side of the hero archetype that knows they are eternal, that knows they are constantly connected to source. Thus, they don't need, in that sense, to go cracking eggs to make the omelet, in that sense.
Okay. And now,
for you, did that make enough sense?
Yes, I have a question, like with scenarios like Harriet Tubman freeing the slaves. that was kind of breaking laws. Is that like the shadow side of that hero archetype?
Not necessarily, because it comes down to the idea of the motivation and the energy. Remember how we said the idea of the motivation is what determines the idea of if it's a light or dark expression of that archetype.
Okay.
It always comes down to the underlying belief system.
Okay.
Does that make sense for you?
Yes.
It comes down to those beliefs and the corresponding actions that represent those beliefs. If it's coming from an entirely positive belief structure, you can only in that sense experience a positive effect from it. And sometimes the idea is the light and dark aspects of the archetype will blend, so to say. And many of you have experienced this, yes, in your own evolutionary process, where you are using a certain amount of positive beliefs, but there's also still some negative beliefs at play. And it creates a blending of light and dark. Understand, this is very common throughout your human history in a variety of different ways, in different cultures and in different times. But as you, in that sense, begin to, so to say, choose the positive belief systems, letting go of the idea of the limiting negative ones, not that all limitation is negative, but you understand what we're getting at here.
Yes.
The idea is then all of your actions come from that place of positivity.
All right. Thank you.
Does that answer the question for you?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Beautifully.
Yay.
Okay. Are we restarted every 200 years? The planet is cleared from the previous and a new one is given a new history?
Well, understand, you in that sense, so to say, are restarted every moment. Billions of times per second. You're a new person. You're a new self. Now, in the idea of a more cosmic sense, there are certain types of gateways energetically that your collective consciousness will pass through. And that oftentimes will represent the idea of a neutral point of transition that allows for you to create an overall net neutrality throughout your entire awareness. So you can then more clearly and more easily choose whatever it is that you prefer as a collective to create. Now, many of you hear that and think this means there will be some kind of global catastrophe that reduces us and restarts us. Understand that those gateways are selected and are chosen by you on the individual level because you as the individual manifest your version of the collective. So define these gateways as positive and as uplifting for your civilization and yourself and as beneficial and as fun and as exciting. And that's the type of effect you'll get from the gateway. But yes, there are certain planetary gateways that elicit an overall net neutrality effect throughout your collective consciousness. So in that sense, you can get a greater understanding of the direction that you prefer to move into.
All right, thank you.
Yay.
Do things look like they'll calm down in 2021, or will it be more intensity like 2020?
Depends on what you mean by calming down and intense.
Well, I guess things that we generally don't prefer.
That's up to you. That's up to you. You are the microcosm of the macrocosm.
As you read the energy, are there going to be a lot of like storms and stuff, metaphorically speaking, in 2021?
Understand that we cannot give that at this time, for you are still, in that sense, navigating the idea of your current storm. Yes?
Yes, yes.
One thing at a time, piece by piece, step by step.
Yeah.
Remember, you're doing fine.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing fine as a collective. The idea is continue to embody your true self. Continue to demonstrate that true self when you are by yourself, when you are with others, in all that you do. And that is how you will transition smoothly through what the Bashar has called the eye of the needle. Let yourself be that living symbol for that which you are. That, in many ways, is what you consider to be your golden ticket.
Okay. Someone asked for 3 suggestions from you for navigating the rest of 2020. But
one suggestion we would give is scan into your overall awareness. Zoom out and scan in simultaneously. So you can see yourself internally from a bigger picture point of view. And from that perspective, begin to then investigate where are the areas of your life where you are not expressing your passion. And begin to then create creative ways where you can express your passion in those areas. Think of it like this. You are a giant tree. Some of the branches and leaves of this giant tree are regularly receiving nutrition from the earth beneath you. Other branches, other leaves are not, and they're saying, hey, can we get some phytonutrients here? Hey, can we get some minerals? Hey, can we get some water? And the idea is, through expressing those other branches of yourself that represent your passion, you then allow for yourself to be a holistic being. So as you then pass through the idea of the eye of the needle, as you then move through the series of different gateways that span from 2020 to 2021, the idea is you will be expanding in the most expansive way possible, rather than through an energetic pattern that represents unexpressed positive potential. Because understand, what you put out is what you get back. So if you go through these gateways not expressing your full positive potential on a microcosmic self level, that's what you'll experience on a macrocosmic collective level, unexpressed positive potential. So express yourself fully. Go into all of the different memories that you have of different passion-based activities you have played with throughout your life. Maybe some of them you have put down and foregone, but still they represented some of the highest forms of passion and excitement to you. See if it makes sense, see if it's exciting to, in that sense, live them from the now, create them anew. Observe in your own imagination if there are certain directions of exploration you have wanted to engage in, you have desired to engage in, but you have not chosen to engage in. Give those passions life. You all, generally speaking, have a great deal of self-time on your hands. We understand there are many of you, of course, that are still working, so to say, but many of you have opportunities now for self-reflection. Go into your imagination and simply express these passions in different ways throughout your days. Make them a regular part of your day, because that is how you crystallize those patterns of preference into your physical reality experience. And as you then go through these gateways, you will in that sense be coding your macrocosmic collective reality to mirror the idea of your own inner reality. So you can experience what you consider to be your utopia unfolding in front of you.
All right, thank you.
Yay.
Is there a quick and easy way to let go of entity attachments, implants, devices, oaths, and contracts?
By shifting to a version of yourself that has never had the implant or the contract in the first place, because you are creating the version of yourself that appears to have a negative contract or appears to have an attachment through the idea of a belief that in that way allows those types of experiences to be manifest. So shift the underlying belief systems and take different actions that represent that different self. So if you define yourself as one who can be attached to, if you define yourself as one who can be manipulated, then you will experience an external reality where those things appear to be occurring. But they only appear to be occurring because you're dreaming them up, just as you dream everything up, because the physical reality is nothing more than a dream. To shift your perspective to a different dream, shift to a different belief system about yourself. Create a new story. You could even, in that sense, open up a notebook, take a nice feathered pen, give it a good lick, and then start to write. Once upon a time, there was a being named, fill in your name here. And this being was born out of unconditional love. This being was created with the customized, beautiful energetics of Source. And this being chose from day one to follow their passion, to be their truest self, to explore creation in as expansive and exciting as a way as possible, and write out a new story and write down in all of your descriptors of the set and settings of that story your preferred definitions for each of the different subjects within that overall story, and then live that story out, act out that character. That's a quick and easy way you can do it. Simply use your imagination. write a new story, live that story out. Make sense?
Yes. Yes.
All right.
Well, our time is up today.
All right. We thank you so much, dear one, for the co-creation of this interaction, our unconditional love, joy, and appreciation to you and your collectives. And we thank you for your infinite existence.
Thank you. Ha'atu.
Ha'atu.